A child's boot sat on the evidence table. Small, brown, with a broken buckle on the left strap. It had been sealed in a clear plastic bag, tagged, numbered, and placed in storage. 4 days ago. Detective Anton Vereshchagin had held that bag in his own hands, signed the report himself, personally handed it to the duty officer. This morning, he walked into the house on Heather Lane, number 9, and found the boot where he had first found it. In the wall. In the same recess. In the same position. As if no one had ever touched it. Vereshchagin stood and stared at it for several seconds without moving. Then he took out his phone, called the evidence room, and asked them to check bag 7/11. The duty officer answered almost immediately. The bag was there, still sealed. No one had signed it out. Vereshchagin hung up, looked at the boot, looked at the wall. And for the first time in the entire investigation, he felt that something was happening for which he had no explanation. This is the story of the house on Heather Lane, number 9, of a family who came there looking for peace, of a little girl who began talking to someone in the dark, and of a secret that is more than 70 years old. That year, spring arrived late. Even in April, frost still settled on the ground in the mornings, and the birch trees along the road stood bare and gray, as if they didn't believe the warmth would ever return. It was on one such morning, a Tuesday, the 12th of April, that the Gromov family turned onto Heather Lane. Mikhail Gromov was at the wheel. He had barely slept the night before, just as he had barely slept for weeks. His doctor had been direct. He could not keep going at the same pace. Another 6 months like this, and the next breakdown might be far worse. Mikhail understood. Not right away, but he understood. And when his wife Svetlana suggested renting a house outside the city for the rest of the summer, he didn't argue. He simply nodded. Took a leave from work. And so here they were. 4 hours on the road, 2 suitcases in the boot, and their daughter Masha in the back seat with her headphones on. Masha was 8 years old. A quiet, thoughtful girl with a habit of staring out of windows for long stretches. Her teacher said she wasn't quite like other children, in the best possible way. She noticed things other children missed. She asked questions that sometimes left adults lost for words. They had found the house through an advertisement. The owner, an elderly woman named Vera Stepanovna, had been renting it out for the 3rd summer in a row. Over the phone, she had been brief but warm. The price was reasonable. The photographs looked promising. A 2-story wooden house, a large garden, an old apple tree by the porch. Nothing unsettling. Nothing to raise concern. When they stopped at the gate, Masha took off her headphones and looked at the house. For a long moment, she simply looked. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "Someone is living there." Svetlana turned around. She asked, "What do you mean, someone is living there? We just arrived." Masha shrugged, said nothing, put her headphones back on. Mikhail decided it was just something children say. Nothing more. Exhaustion from the journey. He stepped out of the car, stretched, looked up at the sky. A single bird circled above the house. Slowly. Round and round. Again and again. They carried their things inside. Vera Stepanovna had left the key under the mat, as agreed. Inside it was clean, warm, and it smelled of wood and something else. Something old. Not unpleasant, simply old. The way houses smell when they have known many different people. That first night, everyone slept soundly. Everyone except Masha. She lay in her room on the second floor, staring at the ceiling, and listened. The house was not quiet. It creaked, breathed, shifted. Somewhere below, perhaps in the basement, something knocked softly. Once. A pause. Then again. Masha was not afraid. She simply turned onto her side and thought, "That's not the house. That is someone who wants to be heard." The first few days were exactly what the first days of rest should be after a long period of strain. Slow, almost tangibly calm. Mikhail woke late, drank coffee on the veranda, looked out into the garden. Svetlana unpacked, cooked, read. Masha ran around the property, climbed the apple tree, collected stones along the fence, arranging them in rows by color for some reason. The neighbors were barely visible. The street was quiet. The houses set far apart, separated by old fences and overgrown hedges. On the third day, Mikhail felt something like relief, as if something inside him had loosened, just slightly. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt that. But something was troubling him. Masha had started going down to the basement, not in secret. She spoke about it openly. She simply picked up the torch and went. The basement was modest, an earthen floor, a few wooden shelves holding empty jars, an old barrel in the corner, the smell of damp and soil. Nothing dangerous. Mikhail had checked himself on the very first day. But what Masha was doing down there, he couldn't understand. One evening he followed her, trying not to make a sound. He stopped on the stairs. Masha was sitting in the far corner, on an upturned wooden crate, talking, quietly, almost in a whisper. He couldn't make out the words, only the tone. She spoke the way you speak to someone you know well, without tension, like a friend. Mikhail cleared his throat. Masha turned around, smiled. He asked, "Who are you talking to?" She answered simply, "The girl who lives here." Mikhail came down, looked around. The basement was empty. He crouched beside his daughter, kept his voice steady, trying not to let his worry show. "What girl, sweetheart?" Masha looked at him with mild surprise, as if he had asked something obvious. "The one who can't leave. She's been here a long time. She says no one is looking for her." Mikhail took his daughter's hand, said calmly, "Let's go upstairs. It's time for lunch." Masha stood, but at the foot of the stairs she stopped, turned back toward the darkness, and said, "I'll come back." That night, Mikhail could not sleep. He lay there thinking, it's an imaginary friend. Children invent them. It's normal. Completely normal. But somewhere deeper he felt it. Something in this house was wrong. Something about this house was not right. On the fifth day, Svetlana decided to tidy the storage room on the ground floor, a small space behind the kitchen that they hadn't looked into yet. They had simply been stacking boxes of extra things there. She worked through the shelves methodically, the way she did everything. Old tin cans, a coil of rope, empty flower pots. On the top shelf, tucked behind a row of tightly packed jars, she found a stack of old magazines, Soviet era, from the 1950s, with blurred photographs on their covers. She set them aside. Then she noticed that one of the boards on the side wall of the storage room was sticking out slightly. Nothing critical, just not quite flush with the rest. She pulled. The board gave way with surprising ease. Behind it was a recess, small, perhaps 30 centimeters deep, and in that recess, objects. Svetlana looked at them for several seconds without moving. Then she took out her phone and turned on the torch. A child's boot. Brown, leather, with a buckle on the strap. The buckle was broken. Small. Perhaps a size 5 or 6. Very old. Beside it, a school exercise book, grid-ruled. The cover had darkened, the corners curled up. On it, written in a child's hand, in pencil, a name. Anya. And a year. 1953. Svetlana lifted the notebook carefully, the way you hold something fragile. She opened it. The pages had held, though they had yellowed. Inside were drawings, pencil sketches, childlike but remarkably precise. The house, the garden, the apple tree. This very house, the one they were standing in. That very apple tree by the porch. And people. A woman with high cheekbones, a man in a military jacket, a girl. Anya herself, judging by the label beneath the drawing. A girl with braided hair and a serious expression. The last page held no drawing, just a few lines written quickly with pressure. The letters uneven, as if the hand that held the pencil had been shaking. They say I'm making it up, but I'm not making it up. I hear her every night. She knocks from below and asks to be found. Nothing more. The entry broke off mid-thought, as if something had interrupted it. Svetlana closed the notebook, stood in the silence of the storage room, then walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on, stared for a long time at the flame beneath the burner. She didn't tell Mikhail straight away, not because she wanted to hide it, simply because she didn't know how to put it into words. How to explain what she had felt, holding that notebook in her hands. That the girl who had written those words in 1953 had heard the same thing Masha was hearing now. Mikhail did not sleep at all that night. Svetlana told him everything after dinner, once Masha had gone to bed. She spoke quietly, almost in a whisper, even though their daughter was upstairs and could hardly have heard them. She placed the notebook and the boot on the table. Mikhail looked at them for a long time. Then he picked up the notebook, leafed through it, read the last entry twice. In the morning, he made a decision. He needed to find out the history of the house. He started with the obvious. He called Vera Stepanovna. She answered fairly quickly, but her voice was guarded. Mikhail explained that they had found some old things in the storage room. A notebook with the name Anya, dated 1953. He asked whether she knew anything about it. A long pause. Then Vera Stepanovna said, the house had come to her from her mother, and to her mother from her mother before that. Who had lived there before them, she didn't know. She had never really looked into it. Mikhail asked directly, had anything ever happened in this house? Another pause, longer this time. Vera Stepanovna said, I'd rather not talk about this on the phone. If you'd like, come and visit. Just let me know in advance. Mikhail wrote it down, thanked her, hung up. After lunch, he drove to the district center, a small town about 15 kilometers away. He found the library and asked for local newspapers from the 1950s. The librarian, an elderly woman with a very straight back, looked at him carefully but asked no questions. She brought out several bound volumes in worn cardboard folders. Mikhail went through the pages one by one. Local news, announcements, harvest reports, letters to the editor. Nothing that could help. And then, a small item. 3 paragraphs, no photograph. August 1953. The headline read,
Girl disappears on Heather Lane. Mikhail read slowly. A girl of 8 years old, name withheld, only initials AK. Disappeared on the night of the 18th to the 19th of August. Search ongoing. Contact the district police station. He turned to the following issues. One more item, 2 weeks later. The search had produced no results. The case had been referred to the regional authority.
And after that, nothing. Not a word. As if the story had simply ended, cut off. Mikhail photographed the pages, closed the folder, returned it to the librarian. She took it, paused for a moment, then said quietly without looking at him, "You're from Heather Lane?" Mikhail nodded. She answered just as quietly, "No one stays there long." He wanted to ask, why? But she had already disappeared behind the shelves, and the library became very still. While Mikhail was at the library, Svetlana was home with Masha. They sat on the veranda, Masha drawing, Svetlana reading. The day was overcast but warm. The garden held that particular stillness that comes before rain. Then Masha set down her pencil. She said thoughtfully, "Mum, why can't adults hear what children hear?" Svetlana lowered her book. She asked carefully, "What do you mean?" Masha answered, "Well, I can hear her knocking, at night, from the basement. You say it's just the house settling, but it isn't the house. It's her." Svetlana put her book down entirely. She moved closer to her daughter, asked gently, "Tell me about her. What does she look like?" Masha thought for a moment. Then she began drawing right over the previous sketch. A girl, braids, a serious expression, a dress with a collar. Svetlana watched and felt something go cold inside her. Because it was the same face as in the drawings in the notebook. Exactly the same. Identical in every detail. She asked, keeping her voice as steady as she could, "Have you ever seen her? In real life?" Masha shook her head. "Never. I only hear her. And I can feel when she's nearby. It goes cold. Not frightening, just cold." Svetlana asked, "What do you talk about?" Masha answered simply. She says she's been here a long time. That at first she was waiting for someone to find her. But then she stopped waiting. Only she can't leave. She says it's because no one knows her name. That until someone calls her by her name, she'll stay here. Svetlana was quiet. Then she asked softly, "Do you know her name?" Masha looked at her, calmly, without fear. "Anya," she said. And at that exact moment, every sparrow in the apple tree took flight at once. All of them. In silence, without a single cry, they simply scattered in every direction, as if startled by something unseen. Svetlana stared at the empty branches. No wind, no sound. Only her daughter, still drawing, calmly, steadily. And on the paper, the face of the girl becoming clearer with every stroke. They drove to Vera Stepanovna together. Masha stayed home. They asked a neighbor they had come to know slightly to keep an eye on her for a couple of hours. Vera Stepanovna lived in the town, in an old 5-story building near the park. She didn't open the door straight away. She looked at them for a long time through the chain. Then she let them in. The flat was small, very clean, with many photographs on the walls, all old, all black and white. She sat them down at the kitchen table, put the kettle on, and sat opposite them herself, hands folded, silent for a moment. Then she said, "I always expected that sooner or later someone would come. That someone would move into that house and start asking questions. Others asked them before. Then they stopped. And I keep renting the place out. I'm not sure why. I suppose because I can't bring myself to sell it. I've tried. Buyers would come, look around, and leave, without explanation." Mikhail placed a copy of the newspaper clipping on the table. Vera Stepanovna glanced at it. She didn't look surprised. She said, "My mother told me about it. Not much, but a few things. The house was built in 38. The first owners, a family by the name of Korsakov. The husband a military man, the wife a schoolteacher, their daughter, Anya. In 53, something happened." What exactly? Her mother had always been vague about it. The girl disappeared. A relative of some sort lived in the house for a while afterward, briefly. Then it passed to other people. Through various hands, until it eventually came to her mother. Mikhail asked, "And what happened to Anya's parents?" Vera Stepanovna was quiet for a moment. The father died young, his heart. The mother lived a long time, into the 80s, but according to the neighbors, she never spoke again. Not about her daughter, not about what had happened. She became silent, completely. Svetlana asked softly, "And no one in the house ever heard anything? After what happened?" Vera Stepanovna looked at her. A pause. Long. "They heard things," she said at last. "Everyone who lived there long enough. They heard it. A knocking. At night. From the basement. My mother called it the old house settling. But the neighbors said something different." Mikhail asked, "What did they say?" Vera Stepanovna stood, walked to the window, stood with her back to them. "They said the girl never left, that she was looking for someone who would listen, someone sensitive enough to hear her." She turned around, looked directly at Mikhail. "How old is your daughter?" Mikhail felt the air in the kitchen grow somehow heavier. 8, he said. Vera Stepanovna nodded, slowly, as if this came as no surprise to her at all. That night, no one slept. Mikhail lay still and listened. Svetlana lay beside him, quiet, unmoving. But he could feel that she wasn't sleeping either. The house breathed around them, creaking, shifting, settling into the dark. And then, a knock. Once, a pause. Again, from below, from the basement. Steady, even, like a metronome. Mikhail got up, took the torch. Svetlana said quietly, "I'm coming with you." He didn't argue. They went down together. The kitchen, then the basement stairs. Narrow, wooden, each step groaning underfoot. The torch cut through the darkness. Earthen floor, shelving, the barrel in the corner. Silence. No knocking, not a sound. As if they had imagined the whole thing. Mikhail swept the torch slowly across the walls, angle by angle. And in the far wall, where before there had been only old plaster, he saw it. a crack. Long, vertical. It had been there before. He'd glimpsed it briefly. But now he stepped closer and understood. This was not just a crack. Along its edges, the plaster had crumbled differently to everywhere else, as if there had once been an opening here. And then it had been filled in. He knocked on the wall. The sound was dull, dense. Then, slightly to the left, he knocked again. There was a hollow space behind the plaster. Svetlana took his hand, said nothing, just held it. Mikhail stood and thought. He thought about the girl, Anya, who in 53 had written in a notebook that she could hear knocking from below. He thought about his own daughter, talking to someone in the dark. He thought about Vera Stepanovna, who had asked Masha's age in a voice that suggested she already knew the answer. The following morning, he called the police. Not because he was certain they would find something, but because he understood. The story of this house had gone unanswered for far too long. Anya had disappeared in 53. 70 years had passed. 70 years of knocking in the night. 70 years of waiting. He could not pretend he had heard nothing. Anton Vereshchagin arrived the day after the call. Young, composed, with a habit of listening without interrupting. He heard Mikhail out, examined the basement, and took the notebook and the boot into evidence. He said he would check the archives. The check took several days. The case file on the disappearance of Anna Korsakov, the AK from the newspaper item, did exist. Mikhail learned this from Vereshchagin over the phone, briefly. The case was opened in 53, closed in 56 for lack of leads. The girl was never found. Not alive. Not dead. On the third day, Vereshchagin returned, this time with 2 colleagues and a warrant to open part of the wall. The neighbors had already taken notice. Someone stood at the fence. Someone else had stepped onto their porch. Mikhail stood by the basement stairs and watched them work. Carefully, methodically, layer by layer. Behind the plaster, brick. A newer course, different mortar from everything else around it, clearly added later. Another layer, and then darkness. Empty space behind the wall. Vereshchagin shone the torch inside, said nothing for a long moment. Then, without turning around, there was a room here, small, walled in. When, exactly, was hard to say. Could have been 53, could have been later. The forensic analysis would tell. Empty. The room was empty. But on the earthen floor, footprints. Small, a child's. As if someone had walked in circles for a very long time. On the walls, scratches at roughly 1 meter from the ground. In even rows, left to right. Thousands of scratches. As if someone had been counting, or marking time. Very patiently, for a very long time. And in the corner, another boot. The left one. The pair to the one found in the storage room. Vereshchagin bagged it himself, numbered it, handed it to a colleague. That night the house was quiet, completely quiet. No knocking. Masha slept soundly. In the morning she said, "She isn't knocking anymore. She says thank you." The forensic examination took more than 2 weeks. By that point, Mikhail had extended the rental. Leaving felt impossible, and not because the investigation required them to stay. Simply, they couldn't go. Not now. Not until things became clearer. Vereshchagin reported by phone, brief, factual.
The brickwork dated to the mid-1950s, the most probable period, 1953 to 54. The scratches on the walls had been made with a sharp implement, likely metal. Their pattern was repetitive, rhythmic. The forensic expert described it as time marking. Someone had been counting days. No biological material was found in the room. No bone, no tissue. Nothing. Mikhail asked, "So there was no one there?" Vereshchagin answered carefully. "There is ample evidence of a human presence. There is no evidence that whoever was there remained." Mikhail was quiet. Then he asked, "So where did she go?" Vereshchagin didn't answer immediately.
There was a sound of papers being moved. Then he said, "We found something else. In the archives. A district medical report from 54. Anya's mother, Nadezhda Ivanovna Korsakov, was admitted to a psychiatric ward. Diagnosis: acute psychotic episode brought on by grief. Her stated condition upon admission, according to the medical staff, she claimed her daughter was alive, that she could hear her voice from inside the walls." Mikhail was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "She could hear her." Vereshchagin replied, "Possibly. Or it was the psychosis. We can't know for certain." But Mikhail was already thinking about something else, about the notebook, about the entry on the last page. "They say I'm making it up, but I'm not making it up. I hear her every night." That wasn't Anya who wrote those words. It was her mother, before they took her away, before she fell silent forever. In the morning, when Vereshchagin arrived for one more walkthrough, he went straight to the storage room. He wanted to look at the recess once more. Fresh eyes after the forensic results. Routine, standard procedure. He opened the door, shone the torch into the recess, and stopped. The boot was there. The same one, the right boot, brown, broken buckle. The very one he had bagged himself 4 days ago, numbered, handed over with a signature. Vereshchagin stood and stared at it. Then he took out his phone, called the evidence room. The duty officer answered. "Bag 7/11 is here, sealed. No one has signed it out." Vereshchagin thanked him, put the phone away, looked at the boot again. He stood there for several minutes. Then he left the storage room, walked to the kitchen, where the Gromovs were sitting. He sat down at the table, placed his notebook in front of him. Did not write anything for a long time. Finally, Mikhail asked, "What happened?" Vereshchagin answered in an even voice, without inflection. "The boot came back. The one I removed. It's in the recess again." Silence. Long. Then Masha, who was sitting by the window with a book and hadn't looked up from the page, said calmly, "She doesn't want it taken away. It's all she has." Vereshchagin looked at the girl for a long time. Then he closed his notebook. He did record the fact in the official report. Briefly, neutrally. Item of physical evidence discovered a second time at original location of seizure. Circumstances of the item's return, undetermined. The case file on the disappearance of Anna Korsakov remains open. The Gromovs left Heather Lane at the end of summer. Masha said goodbye to the house. She went out onto the porch, stood there for a moment, said something quietly. What exactly, Mikhail couldn't hear. The following year, Vera Stepanovna rented the house out again. New tenants, a young couple, no children. They moved out after 3 weeks, without explanation. The house on Heather Lane, number 9, still stands. The garden is growing over. The apple tree by the porch has not borne fruit for several years now.
The recess in the storage room is empty. The boot is gone. No one has found it since. Or perhaps no one is saying.